the extra effort. The train moved slowly, its rhythmic motion and the steady sound of its wheels on the tracks providing a sense of calm. Leaning against me was Marilee, her brunette hair resting gently on my shoulder as she slept. I couldn't help but smile at her innocent snoring, a soft sound that she would probably be embarrassed to know about. I first noticed Marilee at the train station in New Orleans, a city known for its unique location along the Mississippi River. Despite my deep connections to this place, where I had lived for 36 years, it also harbored painful memories for me. Growing up on Canal Street, I had a normal childhood, playing with friends and family. Life took a significant turn when I married Annette Tull. We were blessed with 3 children, but tragically lost them all to illness. Our life together was further strained when Annette became pregnant again. The birth was strenuous, and to my shock, the baby's appearance raised questions about its paternity. In a whirlwind of confusion and anger, I confronted 2 men, Moses Edwards and Cleophas Jones, who had worked for us, suspecting one of them might be involved. Regardless of their reasons, both men left our house hastily. The aftermath was heartbreaking. As soon as Annette was able to travel, I took her to her father's house, only for him to turn us away, unable to accept the situation. Despite Annette's pleas, I left, unable to see past the betrayal. Reflecting on our 12 years together, from courtship to marriage, felt like a dream shattered. I had clung to her letters during the war, hoping for a joyful reunion. But those dreams were now replaced with a bitter reality. My life took an unexpected turn during the war when I volunteered and informed General Degrapont that I was a dentist. To my surprise, he assigned me as a surgeon, emphasizing the Army's greater need for surgeons than dentists. This marked a new chapter in my life, one filled with unexpected twists and turns. No, some could greatly benefit from a skilled dentist, I remarked dryly, eyeing the general's noticeably damaged and discolored teeth. As an Army surgeon, I had acquired the necessary skills for the harsh realities of war, such as setting broken bones, extracting bullets, and performing amputations when injuries were too severe. After General Lee's surrender, I returned to New Orleans, where my dental practice began to thrive once again, and I was welcomed into the city's elite circles. However, beneath the surface, I felt defeated and empty. The joy that my marriage to Annette and the birth of our children had once brought me was overshadowed by the pain of her betrayal. I couldn't shake off the feeling that people were talking about me, mocking me as the dentist whose wife had been unfaithful. The newspapers were filled with tales of the opportunities in the West, and I was drawn to the idea of a new start. The betrayal I had experienced left me yearning for a change, and the West promised new horizons, pure mountain springs, abundant wildlife, and the lure of gold and silver. Deciding to sell everything except for my dental tools, I chose Colorado as my new destination, captivated by the descriptions of the magnificent Rockies and the potential of a fresh beginning. As I prepared to leave, saying my goodbyes, I noticed Marilee Burgess at the train station, dressed elegantly and accompanied by 2 women, perhaps her mother and sister or aunt. As the conductor announced boarding, a scruffy young man offered to help Marilee with her luggage. Aware of the common scams, I intervened, ensuring he would actually assist her and not run off with her belongings. After a firm look from me, he helped her sincerely, and I gave him a nickel for his efforts. Marilee seemed slightly annoyed by my intervention, asserting her independence, but I just smiled and found a seat on the train, ready for the journey ahead and the new life that awaited me. Shortly after departure, the train began its journey with a series of loud noises and abrupt movements. As the scenery of New Orleans blurred outside the window, I briefly thought of Annette, allowing myself this last moment of reminiscence before focusing on what awaited me in the West. Before long, as we neared Baton Rouge, Marilee caught the attention of several men. One particularly bold individual, with a self-assured grin, took a seat next to her, confidently placing his arm around her shoulders, effectively cornering her by the window. Noticing her discomfort, I asked her in French if she needed assistance in getting rid of the unwelcome suitor. Recognizing she had been speaking both English and French with her companions earlier, I figured she would understand. Her relief was evident as she quickly agreed. Addressing the man in English, I firmly asked him to leave my daughter alone, making sure my Colt .45 was visible as a subtle warning. The man, taken aback and perhaps a bit embarrassed, quickly excused himself. I took a seat across from Marilee, ensuring she had space. During our conversation, she revealed that she was also from New Orleans and, like me, was on her way to Colorado. She proudly announced her engagement to William Jacob Benhurst III, showing me his photograph. While the young man in the image appeared rather self-assured and somewhat smug, I kept my opinions to myself, remembering how my own photograph had turned out stiff and uncomfortable due to the long exposure time required back then. Marilee shared that her fiancé's father was the mayor of a town named Benhurst, named after their family. Her pride in this connection was evident as she spoke. "And how did you come to meet William Benhurst III?" I asked, handing back the photograph to Marilee. She explained that William had placed an advertisement in the newspaper, leading to their exchange of letters. After she sent him her photograph, William had promptly replied, expressing his desire for them to marry without further delay. "I actually have it with me," she said with a giggle, pulling out another photograph from her purse. I jokingly asked what else she might have in her seemingly endless handbag, maybe even a horse. The second photograph she showed me captured her striking beauty in great detail: her thick hair, pale eyes, fair skin, finely shaped nose and chin, and her full lips. The photograph also accentuated Marilee's figure, particularly her ample chest, as she was leaning forward with her arms on a table. The dress she wore in the picture hinted at her cleavage, adding a hint of allure to the image. I hesitated for a moment before returning the photograph to her. "No, you should keep it," she insisted, lightly touching my arm. In doing so, she leaned forward, inadvertently drawing my attention to her pronounced figure. "A father should have his daughter's photograph, shouldn't he?" she said in French, presumably to avoid being overheard. "I shall keep my daughter's photograph close to my heart," I promised, placing the photo in my shirt pocket. She then noticed the scar under my eye and gently touched it with her gloved finger. Surprised, she asked about it, and I told her it was from a Union colonel's saber during the war. "Yes, I served as a surgeon in the blind general's army," I revealed. "General Daguerpont," she exclaimed. "My father served with him." Her reaction showed a mix of surprise and a newfound connection between us. When Marilee asked if I knew a certain Anatole Burgess, I simply shrugged. In reality, I remembered Corporal Anatole Burgess all too well from the war. He was a man who had shown cowardice, deserting his post at the first sign of gunfire. General Daguerpont had ordered him and 2 other deserters to be executed for their actions. I recalled one of the condemned men pleading, mentioning his wife and daughter back in New Orleans, but at the moment of their execution, their faces were covered with burlap sacks. General Daguerpont had been furious, berating the man for not standing his ground to protect his family's honor and virtue. That was the ethos he tried to instill in his troops. "There were so many serving under General Daguerpont, Marilee," I said softly. "Many didn't survive long enough for me to get to know them." General Clayton David Daguerpont, a Confederate general, was known more for political connections than military prowess. His troops were often late to battles, earning them the nickname Day Late Troops. During a fierce battle near Paulton, Louisiana, on the way to Vicksburg, Mississippi, General Daguerpont was blinded by shrapnel. Despite his injury, he continued to lead his men, ultimately securing a victory. As we continued our journey, a new passenger boarded in Lafayette, Louisiana, and tried to engage Marilee. This man went as far as to place his hand on her thigh. I immediately confronted him, my anger evident. "Sir, remove your hand from my daughter's leg, or lose that hand," I warned sternly, my hand on my Bowie knife. The man, startled by my reaction and the sight of the knife, was quickly dealt with by the conductor. After the commotion, I suggested to Marilee, "Perhaps it would be best if I were to sit next to you," offering her protection and company for the rest of our journey. I quickly assured Marilee that my offer to sit next to her was purely out of concern for her well-being during the journey, with no hidden intentions. I just wanted her to travel without any further disturbances. "Agreed," she responded, then playfully referred to me as father. Curious about her situation, I asked, "But how come you're traveling alone, without a chaperone?" Marilee explained that although William had sent the money for her train fare, neither her mother nor Aunt Annie could afford to join her. I expressed my opinion quite straightforwardly, suggesting that William should have provided for their fares as well. As the journey progressed, Marilee, tired from the travel, leaned against me, her presence quite close. In Dallas, Texas, we had to change trains. I helped her with her luggage and then attended to my own. Once we were settled, I offered to buy her dinner at the station's dining area. Marilee was initially concerned about not having money for food, a detail William should have anticipated. I reassured her, saying, "Well, dear daughter, Pierre is here," which brought a smile to her face. After eating and freshening up, we prepared to board the next train as the conductor announced its imminent departure. I complimented him on the punctuality as we got on board. Finally, when we arrived in Denver, Colorado, we were both very tired. The station master informed us that Benhurst, where Marilee was headed, was a day's journey away by stagecoach. I inquired about the next departure, which was scheduled for noon the next day. I then arranged for 2 seats on the coach and made sure our luggage would be included, paying the necessary fare. Feeling a bothersome itch on his scalp, Daniel realized he needed to freshen up. Turning to the station master, he inquired, "Could you recommend a place where my daughter and I might stay for the night?" Marilee, with a reassuring smile, placed her hand on my arm as the station master directed us to a nearby lodging. He also assured us that he would take care of our bags and ensure they were on the next coach. "Is there a place to send a telegraph nearby?" I asked next. "Right over here, sir," the man replied, leading us to the small telegraph office. I suggested to Marilee that she should send a telegram to William, informing him of her expected arrival in Benhurst the next day. She composed a brief message, and the station master transmitted it to Benhurst. Afterward, I proposed that Marilee might want to have her hair styled to look her best for her fiancé, while I planned to visit the barber. "Oh, Daniel, please keep the mustache," Marilee said with a smile, lightly touching the bristles with her gloved finger. "It looks so handsome and sophisticated," she added. Although I was aware of the few gray hairs in my mustache, I agreed with a smile. "As you wish, dear Marilee." At the barber, the cost of a shave and a haircut, which also included washing my scalp, seemed a bit steep, but I accepted. I made sure to mention to the barber, as he prepared to shave me, that my daughter had requested I keep the mustache. "Understood," the barber replied with a nod. After the barber finished his work, I couldn't help but compliment him. "You have missed your calling." "How so, sir?" the barber asked, clearly pleased with his work. Daniel jokingly remarked to the barber, "You should have taken up butchery instead," showing his dry sense of humor. Once outside, Marilee again touched his mustache, smiling warmly at him. I reciprocated with a smile, finding her touch comforting. Despite this, I felt a fleeting pang of jealousy, knowing that soon it would be William Benhurst III who would enjoy her company. Pushing these thoughts aside, I offered her my arm as we walked from the barber to the hotel. At the hotel, we were provided with rooms and hot water for washing. I took my time, enjoying the hot water and scrubbing thoroughly with the provided soap. While doing so, I couldn't help but think about Marilee in her room, probably doing the same. Memories of Annette briefly crossed my mind, but I quickly dismissed them. After finishing my wash, I informed the hotel staff through the wall horn. The next morning, I knocked on Marilee's door. She greeted me with a fresh appearance, having done her hair and changed into a new gown. We had breakfast and then headed to the station for the stagecoach. At the station, I showed my appreciation for the station master's help with a $1 coin. Then, as we boarded the stagecoach, I assisted Marilee. She gracefully stepped onto the iron rung and held my hand for support while gripping the handle by the carriage door. I gently guided her into the carriage, ensuring she was comfortably seated for the journey ahead. His hand brushed against her as she moved closer. It was an unintentional touch, but it left Daniel feeling a pang of jealousy towards William Benhurst III. Finding a seat opposite Marilee, Daniel settled in for the journey. The stagecoach driver grumbled about only having 2 passengers as the station master shut the carriage door. "Yes, just them and the mail," the station master replied curtly, and the stagecoach began its journey. The ride through Denver's well-trodden paths was relatively smooth, with only minor jolts. However, once they left the city, the journey grew rougher. The carriage jostled violently, causing Daniel and Marilee to bounce on their hard seats. Daniel called out to Marilee, pointing out the straps they could hold onto for stability. When a sudden tilt threw Marilee towards him, he suggested, "Grab the strap with your left hand, and hold onto me with your right. I'll do the same." They managed to steady themselves somewhat with this arrangement. They made a couple of stops along the way, once to deliver parcels and mail, and again to change horses and drivers. At each stop, they had a chance to stretch their legs and buy some food. Marilee, feeling queasy, declined food at the first stop, but by the second, hunger prevailed, and she asked Daniel to buy her some apples. "You know I can't refuse you anything," Daniel said with a smile, buying the apples. A vendor, noting their interaction, commented on Daniel being a good husband. Marilee quickly clarified, "He's not my husband," while gently touching Daniel's arm. "No, that honor is for someone else," Daniel responded with a sad smile, purchasing some plums for himself. Their sleep during the journey was restless, constantly interrupted by the carriage jolts and bumps. Every time they were about to drift off, a sudden movement would startle them awake. As the night wore on, around 2 in the morning by Daniel's estimate, Marilee finally dozed off against him, quickly starting to snore lightly. The carriage, slow rocking on a steep incline, deepened her snoring into a soft, rhythmic sound with each breath. Feeling a sense of care for her, Daniel gently placed an arm around her shoulders, and she continued sleeping peacefully. Gradually, Daniel too began to drift off into a comfortable sleep. They were briefly awakened by the sounds of crickets and distant coyotes when the carriage stopped and then resumed its journey. At daybreak, both passengers were weary and in need of stretching their legs, but there was no hint of irritation between them. Marilee greeted Daniel with a warm smile. "Ah, Pierre, you've been such a comfortable support for my head," she joked playfully. "I might find it hard to sleep without your peaceful presence beside me," Daniel replied with a smile. When they reached their next stop, the driver confirmed their destination. "Benhurst next, right? That's your stop?" he inquired. "Yes, that's right," Daniel confirmed. Marilee expressed her eagerness for the journey's end. "I'll be so relieved when we arrive," she shared. "We're almost there," Daniel assured her with a smile. At Benhurst, both William Benhurst Jr. and William Benhurst III were waiting to welcome Marilee. Daniel got off first, exchanged smiles with the Benhurst men, and then offered his hand to help Marilee down from the carriage. As she stepped down, she stumbled slightly, and Daniel quickly reached out to steady her, inadvertently touching her inappropriately in the process. As soon as she was stable, Daniel quickly withdrew his hand. Marilee smiled in gratitude and then gracefully greeted the Benhurst men. "Marilee, my darling, it's incredible to finally see you here," William greeted her warmly. "Ma'am, it's a real pleasure to meet you," Will added. Daniel had formed an opinion about William Jacob Benhurst III based on a photograph he had seen. The 24-year-old seemed to exude a sense of arrogance, with a fuller figure and clothes that didn't quite fit him well. His hands appeared soft, as though unfamiliar with manual labor, and his hair was meticulously groomed and noticeably oiled. William Jacob Benhurst Jr. shared a similar appearance, stout and with a softer physique. He had slicked what hair he had remaining firmly to his scalp. Daniel recalled his mother's advice about not judging a book by its cover, but he couldn't help but observe these details. Upon meeting Marilee, William III was visibly delighted, going so far as to kiss her gloved hand in greeting. Marilee introduced Daniel as peer, Dr. Daniel Jordan. When Will inquired about Daniel's profession, Daniel explained that he was trained as a dentist but had performed various surgeries during the war. Asked if he planned to stay in Benhurst, Daniel affirmed that he saw it as his home for the time being, mentioning that Marilee had persuaded him to choose Benhurst over Denver. The first task for Daniel was to find accommodation and a place to set up his practice. Will, being the mayor, was eager to help and suggested an old lawyer's office nearby. He pointed it out and enlisted the help of 3 men from a nearby saloon to assist with their luggage. Will also mentioned a small apartment above the office, but discreetly warned Daniel about its proximity to the Main Street saloon and its less reputable attraction, being cautious not to let Marilee overhear the conversation. How would you be aware of such details if you haven't visited the saloon yourself? Daniel mused to himself. As they walked, William Jacob Benhurst III, or Billy, was enthusiastically pointing out various landmarks and businesses in the town to Marilee. She listened intently, keen to familiarize herself with her new home. When they passed a taxidermist's shop, Marilee curiously inquired about its purpose. Billy explained that it was for preserving and mounting animal heads. Marilee seemed puzzled about what one would do with such a thing, and Billy proudly mentioned his own trophy, a large elk head, displayed in his office. In a low voice, Will confided to Daniel that there was some doubt about who actually shot the elk, Billy or his cousin Elroy, suggesting a bit of ambiguity in Billy's claims. The sound of music caught their attention, coming from the Golden Buddha, a nearby establishment. Will leaned in to share with Daniel, in hushed tones, that it was a place of questionable repute, with services that were unconventional and controversial, involving bathing rituals with the establishment's workers. Daniel couldn't help but wonder how Will knew so much about the place, pondering if it was part of his responsibilities as mayor to be aware of the businesses in town. Overhearing a fragment of their conversation, Marilee asked about the Golden Buddha, showing surprise at the nature of its services. Realizing that Billy might have shared too much, Will quickly called his son over to caution him against discussing such matters, especially in front of Marilee, concerned about giving the wrong impression of their frequentation of such establishments. "Billy, let's keep the topic of the Golden Buddha to ourselves," Will instructed his son in a stern tone. "Yes, sir," Billy replied, his demeanor reflecting his understanding of the gravity of the situation. As they walked along the wooden sidewalks of the town, Daniel learned more about Will's background. Will had been a lawyer in St. Louis, Missouri before he moved to this territory, having bought several thousand acres of land. It turned out to be a lucky move for him, as the discovery of gold and silver in the area led to the rapid development of the town of Benhurst. Daniel also found out that Billy, Will's son, served as the deputy mayor and was his father's right-hand man in the administration of the town. Curious about the town's governance, Daniel inquired about the mayoral elections. "Do elections occur here? Is it possible that someone might challenge you for the position of mayor?" he asked as they walked towards the former lawyer's office. Will seemed taken aback by the question. "So far, no one has challenged me," he responded, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. Daniel was pleased with the office space and the lodging upstairs. He expressed his future plans to build a homestead and explore farming, mentioning the potential for growing apples in the area. Will enthusiastically suggested a location with a stream running through it. Feeling hungry, Daniel suggested that they find some food. Billy mentioned the Main Street saloon, but a stern look from his father quickly silenced him. Will, instead, recommended a Leaner's at the end of the street, known for serving excellent meals. Daniel agreed to go to a Leaner's. As they reached their new accommodation, the 3 local youths arrived with their luggage. Daniel suggested that Marilee should take the upstairs bedroom, while he would sleep on the couch downstairs. Billy started to protest, seemingly misunderstanding the arrangement, but he was quickly cut off. "When the 2 of you are married, and not a moment before," Daniel stated firmly in response to the young man's eagerness. Billy, full of youthful zeal, declared, "Then we shall be married by sunset." Marilee couldn't help but giggle at his enthusiasm, though Daniel remained unamused. Will, with a patronizing smile, patted his son on the shoulder and advised, "In due time, boy, in due time." After this exchange, Will courteously paid the 3 local workers for their help with the luggage. News of the arrival of a skilled dentist spread quickly in Benhurst. Daniel frequently found his office filled with townspeople and miners seeking his services. His experience as a medic in the Army of the Confederacy proved invaluable, as he was often called upon to treat injuries from brawls and rare gunfights. Daniel advised those who got injured at work to be more careful in the future. However, he was notably stern with those injured in gunfights, giving them firm lectures about resolving conflicts without violence. "The Almighty determines our time to leave this earth," he would say passionately. "Let this pain serve as a reminder to choose words over bullets." For those gravely wounded, Daniel showed great compassion, comforting them with biblical passages as they passed away. Despite the local Baptist minister's disapproval, Dr. Daniel Jordanare worked even on Sundays. When confronted by Reverend Dummel, Daniel explained, "Pain does not observe the Sabbath. Just as you serve the Lord by caring for souls, I serve by tending to their physical needs." The Reverend, still somewhat uneasy, pointed out that Marilee also worked alongside Daniel. To this, Daniel responded, "She is learning the value of service. And while she is like a daughter to me, Marilee Burgess is not my blood relative." Daniel had a suspicion that some visitors came to his office not just for dental care but also to catch a glimpse of Marilee, whose pleasant demeanor and appearance made her quite popular, especially in the front office where she greeted patients. Billy seemed rather satisfied seeing others showing interest in Marilee, his fiancée. In preparation for the wedding, Mrs. McCall, the town's dressmaker, was busy creating Marilee's gown with multiple layers of chiffon and ivory silk. Marilee was hesitant about the cost of $12, but Daniel, seeing the importance of the occasion, gave his approval. Marilee promised to repay Daniel once she was married, to which he replied warmly, "Dear Marilee, you have already given me more than you know." For breakfast, they often visited the Main Street Saloon, which served a dish called huevos rancheros. Marilee, however, was not pleased with the overly friendly Mexican waitress who seemed to pay extra attention to Daniel. Daniel, amused, reminded Marilee that she had no claim over him, to which she playfully responded that she indeed had a claim until she became Mrs. William Jacob Benhurst III. The evening meals at the saloon were served by the matron of the establishment, a woman with a sparsely toothed smile. She made an inappropriate suggestion to Daniel in Spanish, hinting at offering more than just food. Marilee, unaware of the conversation's content, asked what was said, and Daniel, protecting her innocence, told her that the matron was just expressing hope that they enjoyed their meal. Will Benhurst took Daniel to see a piece of land for sale just west of Benhurst. It was a beautiful Sunday morning, and the serene environment with an eagle soaring overhead and sunlight reflecting off a nearby stream made the place seem idyllic. Will offered the land at $3 an acre, a deal Daniel found more than fair and readily accepted. Those who couldn't immediately pay for Daniel's dental services contributed in other ways. Lumber was ordered from Denver, and Daniel, with a group of helpers, would work on his new homestead. Women, including those who owed services, often sought Marilee's advice on the project, sometimes disregarding Daniel's instructions. "Enough of this house belongs to me, not her," Daniel exclaimed when one woman instructed her husband to position the window according to Marilee's preference. "And when you match her efficiency, I'll listen to you," the woman retorted, insisting her husband follow Marilee's guidance. Marilee gently touched Daniel's cheek, calming his frustration. She looked up at him with a smile, and he couldn't resist smiling back. "Father, the window will let the evening sun brighten the living room," she explained softly. Billy was always close by, yet he didn't participate in the physical work. He didn't use a hammer, carry wood, or paint. The day of the wedding finally came. Reverend Dummel greeted Daniel with warmth. He had once woken up with severe mouth pain. Daniel, without complaint, had efficiently removed the Reverend's painful tooth. His only request was for the Reverend to officiate his and Marilee's marriage. "I was prepared to do so anyway," Reverend Dummel remarked. "Isn't it wonderful how fate works?" Daniel said cheerfully. "Now, I need to move a couch. Could you please close the door behind you, Reverend?" Reverend Dummel now treated Dr. Daniel like an old friend. He introduced Daniel to his wife, Jennifer Dummel, who had a strong presence. Jennifer offered a modest smile and then played hymns on the piano, with the congregation joining in. "And now, would you please escort Marilee into the church?" Reverend Dummel requested of Daniel. Daniel nodded and walked to a small room near the church entrance. He knocked and then opened the door. "Father, should I really be doing this?" Marilee inquired as Daniel entered. "Dear Marilee, it's common for brides to wonder that," he replied with a smile. "Even my own wife had those doubts." "Wife, what happened to her?" Marilee asked. "You never mentioned." "She's in the past, today is about you," Daniel reassured her. Marilee gazed into his light, almost golden brown eyes, noticing the deep sadness hidden within them. "You've been hurt before," she said softly. She stood and gently caressed his cheek with her hand. "I hope never to cause you such grief, dear father," she murmured, her gloved finger lightly brushing his well-groomed mustache. "You already have," he attempted to say lightheartedly. "My heart felt a pang when you mentioned your commitment to someone else." She smiled at his attempt to lighten the mood, and her laughter filled the air when he playfully nibbled on her finger. Marilee then gave him a gentle kiss. Picking up a bouquet of fresh flowers, she took his arm. "Let's go, dear father," she encouraged. During the ceremony, Daniel was visibly emotional. Tears flowed freely as the minister declared them husband and wife, and announced Daniel wept openly as the radiant young bride walked out of the church arm in arm with her new husband. "Come on, man, pull yourself together." Will tried to say jokingly. Will's eyes were misty too. The two men embraced, sharing a moment of unguarded emotion, then followed the newlyweds to the church exit. The next morning, Daniel made his way unsteadily to the Main Street saloon. He had overindulged in Will's whiskey and was surprised to find himself on his office couch, rather than at home, which was now furnished with orders from St. Louis and Denver. He was thankful he hadn't ended up sleeping under his horse in the stable. A sleepy waitress greeted him and looked around curiously. "Where's your wife?" she asked. "She's not my wife," Daniel replied with a pained smile. The waitress raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. She asked if he was feeling unwell. "I had a bit too much to drink," he admitted. "Please wait here, Center Doctor," she instructed. Shortly after, she came back with a bubbling glass. Daniel sniffed it warily and felt his stomach churn. "Drink, Center Doctor, it's a remedy," called out the cheerful patron from the kitchen doorway. With determination, Daniel drank the strong mixture in one go. "Ah, see, feeling better." The man laughed as Daniel coughed, feeling the drink's effect. Indeed, after a few moments, Daniel had to admit he felt more clear-headed than when he'd first entered. When the girl served him breakfast, he began to eat. He noticed she had adjusted her outfit, revealing more than was customary. He reminded himself to focus, smiling politely at the young woman. That evening, instead of returning to his lonely house, Daniel decided to dine at Alina's and then stroll around the town. As the dusk settled, he noted the soft lights and lively sounds from the local establishments. The Golden Nugget Saloon was particularly lively, with music and laughter echoing from within. Daniel observed the typical scene of a bustling saloon: card games, drinks, and patrons enjoying the evening. The atmosphere was vibrant, with a mix of people engaging in various activities. Passing by another establishment, Daniel heard a voice offering a bath service. Curious, Daniel inquired about the cost of the bath. "For someone like you, $2, the man suggested with a hint of a foreign accent. "All right, $2, Daniel said, handing over the coins. "Thank you, sir. A man of honor, paying up front," the man complimented, guiding Daniel into the dimly lit foyer. Another man greeted them with a bow and smile, leading Daniel up 2 flights of stairs to a room with a cast-iron clawfoot bathtub. As they entered, 2 women in simple red silk robes brought in pots of steaming water, filling the tub before leaving the room. They repeated this several times until steam gently rose from the tub. The man instructed the women in a foreign language, and one left with the pots while the other, quite petite, stayed and bowed to Daniel before the man left the room. The woman helped Daniel with his bow tie and jacket, setting them neatly on a chair. She then assisted with his shirt and trousers, folding them carefully. Daniel felt slightly awkward as the woman helped him out of his remaining clothes and into the tub. The bath was equipped with various brushes and a cake of soap on a shelf, and there was a curved wooden rest for comfort. The woman then prepared herself for the task, removing her robe and efficiently tying her long black hair into a bun with wooden pins. Daniel observed her professional manner as she got ready to assist him with the bath. As she turned around, her petite and graceful figure was apparent, highlighted by her gentle curves. Daniel, observing her youthful appearance, felt a need to ask about her age. "Child, how old are you?" he inquired. She paused, looking puzzled and unable to understand his question. Daniel tried again in Spanish, thinking she might understand, given the presence of Mexican laborers in the town. However, she still seemed confused and shook her head as she stepped into the tub. Seeing her difficulty in understanding, Daniel attempted to ask her age in French. Her eyes widened in recognition. "You speak French?" she exclaimed, surprised and delighted. "Just a little," Daniel replied. Another girl, drawn by the sound of excitement, burst into the room. The first girl quickly conversed with her in a rapid, unfamiliar language and gestured for her to leave, which she did. Daniel repeated his question about her age. "I am 20, she answered simply. She then settled into the tub, starting to pour water on Daniel's back with a wooden ladle. Noticing her unique appearance, Daniel commented on it. "It's a cultural practice," she explained while continuing her task. In fluent French, she began to narrate her background. Daniel felt the gentle pressure of her touch on his back as she carefully ladled water onto his shoulders. The subtle aroma of cloves and ginger lingered in the air from her breath. "I am one of 9 daughters," she shared, her tone tinged with melancholy. As Nguyen recounted her story, Daniel asked her to speak more slowly. Her French had a Parisian accent mixed with something unique, while his own Creole French accent was probably just as unfamiliar to her. She explained how, back in her village, many sought to marry her and her sisters. However, her father rejected all suitors, deeming none worthy of meeting his expectations or price for their hands in marriage. 2 of her sisters had rebelled and left to marry soldiers, bringing shame to their family. The eldest sister had married a French attaché. Nguyen then began to gently scrub Daniel's back with a soft bristled brush. She told him about her husband, a man from another village who had bought her, promising her father that he was a respectable businessman. He had assured her father of taking Nguyen to America to work in a ribbon factory. "Does your husband know about this?" Daniel asked, as she rinsed his back. "He is the one who instructed me to come here," she replied, her voice carrying a note of resentment. She then stood before him, her skin glistening from the Water. Daniel noticed her playful demeanor as she moved, bringing a lightness to the otherwise somber atmosphere. She laughed, a sound that was musical and infectious, causing Daniel to blush. Kneeling in the water, Nguyen carefully lifted one of Daniel's legs. He flinched slightly as she began to scrub his foot with the brush. Looking up at him, her head just above the water, she smiled reassuringly. She spoke of her husband, Mutai, and the cultural practices he insisted on, including the removal of body hair. Revealing a scar on her arm near her shoulder, she shared the painful memories of being coerced into obedience. Her hands moved skillfully as she continued to wash him, maintaining a professional and respectful distance. Daniel felt a moment of discomfort as she accidentally brushed against him, but she quickly moved on to wash his other foot with the same care and attention. Throughout this, Nguyen's resilience and strength in the face of adversity were evident, painting a picture of her challenging life and the cultural expectations she navigated. She skillfully finished washing his leg and then motioned for him to adjust his position. Settling in front of him, her face close to his, she gave him a warm smile. Reaching behind him, she took her ladle and gently poured water over his chest. "You are very handsome," she complimented softly. "And you are a true beauty," Daniel responded, admiring her smile and perfect teeth. She began to scrub his chest with care, ensuring every part was attended to. After thoroughly cleaning his chest and underarms, she leaned closer to reach her ladle, her proximity noticeable. She playfully smiled at him as she continued her task. She paused momentarily as she encountered an unexpected area of his body, then quickly refocused on rinsing his chest and underarms. As she scrubbed his ribs with the soft brush, he flinched slightly, and she continued down to his belly with the same meticulous care. When it was time to wash more sensitive areas, Nguyen made it clear, in English, that certain boundaries were to be respected due to her marital commitments. She then asked Daniel to adjust his position again, so he was sitting on a submerged shelf in the tub. She continued her job professionally, taking care to wash him thoroughly. Daniel was caught off guard by the new sensations and found himself reminiscing about a joke he once heard about a naive bride-to-be discussing family plans with her mother. The joke revolved around a misunderstanding about the process of conception. Daniel had found humor in the bride's innocence at the time, and now, in this unexpected situation, he reflected on his own experiences and the cultural differences in intimacy. Daniel experienced a new and unexpected sensation as Nguyen continued her attentive washing. She was thorough in her task, ensuring that every part was meticulously cleaned. Her delicate touch was precise, and Daniel found himself overwhelmed by the intensity of the experience. Her hands were attentive and skillful as she continued her work. Daniel was taken aback by the unexpected and intense sensation, finding himself vocalizing his surprise. As Nguyen continued, Daniel reached a peak of sensory overload, expressing his astonishment at the intensity of the experience. When the moment passed, Daniel relaxed, feeling drained and weak. Nguyen, with a professional demeanor, completed her task and showed Daniel that she had completed the washing thoroughly. She then summoned another attendant with a call in her native language. The second woman entered with a large, warm towel, laid it out for Daniel, and respectfully left the room. Nguyen then efficiently dried Daniel with the towel, ensuring he was completely dry. She quickly dried herself too and let down her hair, which cascaded down her back, adding to her allure. Daniel couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of attraction. As she helped him dress, their eyes met. Daniel, curious about her earlier statement, asked her why she had mentioned specific boundaries regarding intimacy. Nguyen explained that many clients had misconceptions about the services offered and her personal boundaries. She clarified that while she provided thorough and professional care, there were limits to what was included in her service. She indicated with a hand gesture that she often had to manage expectations and provide clarity to clients. Daniel looked at her, seeking understanding, and she explained further. After their conversation, Nguyen knocked on the door, signaling the end of their session. I have a special technique," she whispered discreetly as the man opened the door for Daniel. "Will you come back? You enjoyed the service, right?" The man inquired with a smile, leading Daniel down the stairs. Exiting the Golden Buddha, Daniel encountered a newcomer trying to keep a low profile. Their hats collided accidentally, and when the stranger looked up to apologize, Daniel realized it was Jennifer Dummel, the Reverend Dummel's wife. He chose not to acknowledge her and quietly excused himself, quickly leaving the establishment. Outside, Daniel made his way to the stable, paid the stable hand, and mounted his horse with a sense of purpose. He reflected on his decision to stay out instead of returning home the previous night. His horse seemed familiar with the route, and he rewarded it with extra oats upon their return to Crescent City home. Back in his routine, Daniel felt the absence of Marilee, his former office companion. He missed the casual conversations, her presence during meals, and the subtle observations he used to make about her. His patients also noticed Marilee's absence and often expressed their disappointment upon learning of her marriage. Feeling the monotony of his daily routine, Daniel struggled with the lack of distractions in Benhurst. The absence of a Catholic church limited his options for community involvement, and he wasn't interested in the saloon or church activities as alternatives. Driven by a need for a change, Daniel found himself returning to the Golden Buddha one Monday evening. He was not fooling himself. He knew exactly where he was headed. "Ah, back again. Did you enjoy your last visit?" Mu greeted him at the entrance. "I'd like the $5 bath, please, with Nguyen," Daniel requested quietly, handing over a $5 coin. Daniel pondered the cultural differences, especially how Mutai seemed at ease offering his wife's professional services. He couldn't imagine doing the same with Marilee or his wife, Annette, reflecting on the stark contrasts between his culture and theirs. As on his previous visit, it was the same attendant who escorted Daniel upstairs. A knock at the door preceded their entry, and once again, Nguyen and her colleague hurriedly brought in pots of hot water for the bath. Nguyen greeted Daniel Jordanaire with a brief smile before quickly focusing on preparing the bath. The attendant informed her in their language that Daniel had paid for the premium bath service. Tin, the second attendant, looked on with a hint of envy. She felt she had her own attributes that were more appealing than Nguyen's. Furthermore, she noticed that Nguyen, being married to Mutai, often received better treatment, including more food. Understanding her colleague's feelings, Nguyen explained, "It's because I can speak French," hoping to ease the tension. Tin nodded in understanding. Nguyen then offered to recommend Tin to Daniel, acknowledging her skills. As Nguyen helped Daniel undress for the bath, she inquired about Mutai's reaction to his choice of the premium service. Daniel shared that Mutai hadn't said much or suggested any other attendant. Nguyen briefly masked her bitterness at this, and as she finished helping Daniel undress, she noticed his readiness for the bath and greeted it with a smile. She then carefully helped Daniel into the hot water and proceeded to undress herself, putting up her hair in the same manner as before with chopsticks. Following the routine of their previous encounter, Nguyen bathed Daniel thoroughly. When it was time to wash the more sensitive areas, she approached the task with care and professionalism, ensuring that every part was attended to. As the bath concluded, Daniel expressed his relief and satisfaction with a deep grunt, feeling completely relaxed after the thorough and attentive service Nguyen provided. Nguyen then invited Daniel to sit down again in the bath. She resumed the bathing process, focusing on ensuring that every part of him was clean and relaxed. She reminded him gently, "My commitment is to my husband." Daniel, referring to the service he paid for, mentioned the amount. Nguyen then guided him to sit on the submerged shelf, arranging his position carefully for the next part of the bathing process. She reached for a small jar on a shelf, opened it, and took out a thick, white ointment. Nguyen applied this ointment to Daniel's skin, and he felt a peculiar sensation from it, a mix of coolness and warmth. After applying the ointment, Nguyen stood up, put the jar back, and reiterated her commitment to her husband. Daniel watched as she applied the ointment to herself, ensuring that she was taking care of her own hygiene meticulously. As she applied the ointment, Daniel's body reacted naturally to the visual and sensory stimuli. Nguyen carefully handled the situation with professionalism, ensuring that the bathing service was thorough and respectful of her boundaries. Nguyen then assisted Daniel with the bathing process, focusing on areas that needed extra care. Daniel expressed his astonishment and discomfort at the intensity of the experience. Nguyen explained her reasoning, emphasizing her desire to avoid pregnancy, as she continued with the bathing process, ensuring that Daniel was completely clean and relaxed. The bath concluded with a focus on hygiene and comfort, respecting the professional boundaries set by Nguyen and the services offered at the establishment. During the bathing session, Daniel and Nguyen continued their interaction with care and respect for personal boundaries. Daniel, in a moment of lightheartedness, joked about the impossibility of certain outcomes from their actions. Nguyen maintained a professional demeanor, focusing on ensuring a thorough and hygienic bathing experience. Daniel, appreciating her dedication, gently supported her efforts. As they progressed through the bath, Daniel remained aware of the unique and careful techniques Nguyen employed. He observed the meticulous way she managed the bathing process, ensuring cleanliness and hygiene were paramount. Feeling the culmination of the intense and thorough bathing process, both Daniel and Nguyen expressed a sense of relief and satisfaction. Afterwards, Nguyen carefully cleaned and ensured everything was hygienically taken care of. She then called for the second attendant, Tin, to bring a flannel sheet, taking the opportunity to compliment Tin's skills in bathing. Tin, pleased with the acknowledgement, smiled graciously at Daniel and then left the room. Later, Mu, Nguyen's husband, questioned her about Daniel's specific request for her service, wondering why he chose her over the other attendants. He taunted her, questioning her attributes compared to the others. Nguyen explained that her ability to speak French was the reason for Daniel's choice. She also mentioned that Daniel had come with a warning about a potential sheriff's visit the next night, which could lead to their arrest and deportation. Mu reacted with fear and surprise at the mention of the sheriff, concerned about the implications of this information. Mu, hiding in Benhurst, was harboring a dark past. He was wanted in San Francisco for murder and in his home country for extortion, bribery, and murder. In this small, unknown town, he had found a haven where his past crimes were unknown. His business partner, Ng Sindao, shared his concerns. They both anticipated a raid by the sheriff and his deputy, which would likely result in the arrest and deportation of the women working for them. However, they had a plan for their own safety. Concealed in a secret underground shaft, they believed they would be secure while the authorities conducted their search. Once the coast was clear, they planned to flee Benhurst and hide in Denver, a city they thought would offer them anonymity. Mutai took pride in the fact that his wife, Nguyen, had warned them of the impending raid. This information allowed them and NG Sindao to take preemptive measures. They emptied their safe, filled with earnings, and stored the money in the underground hideout. After securing their wealth, they woke the women to perform their daily tasks. Sin, overseeing the operation, assigned roles to the women. Fo Tinsei was to attract customers at the door, and Chin Pom would guide them upstairs. He emphasized the importance of remembering the placement of each client. When Nguyen inquired about the men's whereabouts, Mutai responded irritably, emphasizing they had important business to attend to. Nguyen expressed her concern for her husband's safety, her eyes reflecting genuine worry. As the clock neared 9 o'clock, Mu and Sin hurried to their underground refuge. They had built this hidden space soon after arriving in Benhurst, specifically for a situation like this. Once inside, they pulled the hatch shut, enveloping themselves in darkness and settling down to wait out the raid. Unbeknownst to them, their bags filled with money were not in the hideout. With them, in their haste and anxiety, they had overlooked this crucial detail. At a little after 9, Nguyen made her way quietly down to the basement. She passed Fo Tinsei and Chin Pom, who were engaged in their assigned duties, seemingly uninterested in the events unfolding around them. Nguyen proceeded with caution, ensuring her steps were silent as she descended the basement stairs. The meticulousness of her movements indicated she was well aware of the gravity of the situation and the potential consequences that awaited if their plan went awry. The large, empty safe stood in the corner of the room, a massive structure weighing over 800 pounds. Nguyen skillfully looped a rope around the safe, then strategically wrapped it around several beams in the room. With surprising ease and technique, she lifted the heavy iron safe off the ground and secured the rope to a support stud. She then positioned a second rope, maneuvering the safe to hover just above the hatch. After securing this rope to the same support stud, she carefully lowered the safe, ensuring it rested precisely over the hatch, sealing it shut. With a mix of bitterness and resolve, Nguyen thought to herself, "Goodbye, my dear husband. You plan to abandon us, now I leave you to face the consequences of your actions." Upon leaving the basement, Nguyen was confronted by Chin, who asked about her whereabouts. Chin then quietly informed her that there was someone asking for her. Acknowledging this, Nguyen went to the room where Jennifer Dummel was waiting. Jennifer appeared visibly upset. Despite the language barrier, Nguyen offered an apology and proceeded to assist Jennifer with undressing and getting into the hot bath, handling the situation with kindness and professionalism. As she disrobed to join the bath, Nguyen planned to visit Dr. Daniel the next morning, hoping he would be able to assist her with her current predicament. This thought gave her a sense of hope amidst the turmoil. My comment: do you think OP just fools around? Part 2 ending coming in a few hours. Make sure you hit that sub and bell button for the latest update.